So in this episode, I'm going to be showing you exactly how I created the ultimate staircase makeover. From this custom hardwood and glass handrail to custom-made hardwood stair treads with LEDs. So you're going to want to stick around for this one. And as always... Okay, so before we start demoing this project, I kind of wanted to show you what we had to start with and our reasons why we want to get rid of it. So right now we have this kind of big ugly pony wall and we want to get rid of this and then replace it with some glass to make this space seem a lot bigger, a lot more modern, and just open everything up a lot more. At the end of this pony wall we got this big ugly post that doesn't do too much. It goes up through the ceiling and doesn't connect to anything above, so it's not structural in any way. I think its main purpose was to add some support to this end of the pony wall, stop it from flexing when people come up and down the stairs. So we're going to rip it out.
Okay, ready? Good? You okay?
Yeah, I'm cold.
Can you just tell everyone that you're okay?
Okay, so now that everything is ripped out, I have a better idea of what's underneath and how to create the handrail that I want into this situation. Okay, so my main concern was how I was going to attach this newel post. The post down the far end will be attached to a wall, but this is kind of freestanding, so I got to attach it some way. And there's many ways I can do that depending on the situation. So, fortunately for me, I have this 2x12 floor joist, which sits perfectly in line of where I want my post to sit. So that gives me something to attach it to. If I didn't have this, I would probably go over like a metal bracket fixed to the bottom of the post, attached to the floor, which will hold that all together, and then you just have to cover it. Okay, so now that I have my plan, it's time to mill up some lumber. Yeah. Okay, so now that I've figured out how to create the design that I want, it's now time to build it. And for the material, I'm using maple, which is the exact same match as the existing flooring. So I have two lengths at 2 inches thick to create the handrail and the two posts, and then I got a piece a little bit thinner to cover up that weird transition in the existing flooring. As you can see, the lumber is rough, so it needs milling up and brought down to the thicknesses that I need. So we're going to take them over to the jointer and get them jointed on two faces. Yeah! So I ran all the lengths of maple through my jointer to get two flat faces perpendicular to each other. I then ripped the lengths down to just over 6 inches on my table saw. Once they were ripped down, I then put them through my planer to bring them down to just over 1.5 inches in thickness. I then cut one of the lengths in half, which is going to make the two newel posts. I ripped the two halves down to just over 3 inches wide on my table saw. Once they're all ripped down, I then glued two other pieces together to form the larger newel posts out of the two. I clamped them together and then let them dry overnight. Once dried, I then removed the clamps and then gave them a light pass through the jointer to remove any of the rough, unsquare edges. I then sanded the post to 3 inch by 3 inch square. I also sanded the second post to 1.5 inches in thickness by 3 inches wide. And sanded the handrail to 3 inches by 1.5 inches in thickness. Okay, so now that all my stuff is milled up, I got the two newel posts, I got the handrail, and I got the transition piece. I'm gonna put these aside for just now and make a start on the transition piece. So the idea of the transition piece is kind of to hide where the flooring stops and the handrail starts. So I got to cut out some sections on the underside to sit over the flooring to kind of hide that ugly transition. I'm going to start off by setting up my dado stack in my table saw and then start removing some material. I set up the dado stack in my table saw to remove a 3/4 inch by 3/4 inch channel out of one side of the transition piece. And then using my router, I removed the same size channel out of one end. Once routed, I then cleaned it up with a chisel. Once cut out, I then brought it in to make sure it covered all the flooring and had an equal overhang over the wall above the stairs. On the transition piece, I marked out the position of the 2x12 floor joist and the center of the transition piece where the newel post will be going. So my plan is to shoot half of the newel post down through the floor and screw it into the side of the 2x12, securing it into place. So using an offcut, I marked out the section of the newel post which will sit past the 2x12. To help reduce tear out and get a cleaner cut, I chiseled alongside the marks that I made. I then drilled a couple of holes to allow for the jigsaw blade and then removed that section with a jigsaw. With the dado stack in my table saw, I then removed 1.5 inches, which is half of the newel post thickness by 12 inches wide. Once cut out, I made sure it fit nice and snug. To help the two pieces to sit together more securely and to help with the structure, I then used some domino joinery. That said, I feel like the screws and glue alone will hold this piece together nice and strong. I removed the section of the subfloor where the post was going to go down through the floor, and then brought the two pieces in to make sure they fit nice and snug. Once I was happy how they were all fit in, I then brought in the smaller newel post and taped it into position with some painter's tape, making sure that it sits nice and level. On the main newel post, I made a mark at 36 inches, which is going to be the maximum height of my handrail. I then set up my laser level to that mark, and then made a mark where the laser level sat on the second newel post. I brought the post back into the shop and made a second mark 1.5 inches down from that first mark, and then cut the post to size. I made the same markings on the second newel post and then marked out the miter to accommodate for the handrail. I then cut that miter on my miter saw. I then marked out the exact same miter on one end of the handrail, and then cut the handrail to length on my miter saw.
Okay, so now most of the framing of the handrail is complete. In between each post, I'm going to be putting 2 sheets of glass to really modernize this whole thing. In order for the glass to sit securely in between the post and the handrail, I'm going to have to cut out a little channel for it to sit in. I'm using 3/8 of an inch glass, so I'm going to cut out a 5/8 of an inch channel dead center of the posts, the handrail, and the track. That way I have 1/8 of an inch either side for the wood to expand and get bigger and smaller, so it doesn't jeopardize the glass in the future. So using the dado stack on my table saw, I removed a 5/8 by 5/8 channel out of the center of each piece. When cutting out the channel on the transition piece, I then made sure to stop it to when the new post starts. Once the channel was cut out, I then reassembled the whole handrail and then measured for the glass, allowing a 1/2 inch gap in between the two pieces of glass.
So now that the glass is measured and ordered, it takes a couple of weeks to get here, so I'm going to dismantle the handrail and put it somewhere safe for now and make a start on the treads and the actual staircase itself. Okay, so first things first, you have your treads and you have your risers. Each one of these treads have an overhang between 1.5 inches. We got to cut it down flush with a riser, and then we'll recreate that overhang with the new material on top. So there's many ways of cutting down the treads, either with a multi-tool or a circular saw, but for me, this staircase needs a lot of work. I mean, this tread wasn't even held down. I think the whole staircase was held together with just the carpet alone. So I'm going to take each one out, run it through my table saw, and then screw it and glue it back to how it should be.
So I proceeded to remove all the treads and risers and then rip the treads down to 9.5 inches on my table saw, so that when I reassemble the staircase, they are flush with the risers. Once cut, I then put the risers and treads back into position using wood screws and subfloor adhesive.
Okay, so for the stair treads themselves, we're going to be making them out of Eastern maple. So unlike the actual handrail, which is Western, Eastern is a little bit harder, a little bit more dense, more suitable for like flooring and stair treads. So these are obviously pretty rough right now, so we're going to mill them up and then laminate them together. So let's get to it. Yeah!
So I ran each individual piece of hard maple through my jointer to get 2 flat square faces. I then brought them all down to 3/4 inch thick in my planer. Once all milled up, I then glued and clamped all the pieces together in pairs and let them sit to dry overnight. Once dried, I then put them back through the planer to clean up any of the glue marks.
All 13 treads have been milled up to 3/4 inch in thickness and just over 12 inches in width, though we're not done yet. Each tread I'm going to rip down to 11 inches in width, and with the offcut from each tread I'm going to stick on the underside of the nosing, create an 1.5 inch lip, like this one. It just gives it a more modern, thicker look, and it helps to hide the diffuser for the LED. So let's get ripping. Also, quickly, I just want to mention that you can totally skip all these steps by buying pre-made stair treads from your local big box store. They're easily available, but I have a certain vision in mind, which you can't often get from those big box stores, so I'm making my own. But like I said, you can totally miss all these by buying them already pre-made.
So on my table saw, I then cut each tread down to 11 inches wide. I then pinned and glued each offcut to the front underside of each tread. As I don't have hundreds of clamps, I found that blue painter's tape works really well to hold the two pieces down together while drying. Once dried, I then cleaned everything up with my orbital sander.
Okay, so now it's time to cut the steps, and in order to do that perfectly without half-assing it with a bevel, I've come up with a super simple solution with some 1/4 inch MDF offcuts. I cut 2 pieces of MDF into like a trapezoid shape at about 11 inches, which is the distance of my tread. At one end, I cut a flat spot which butts up to the edge of the riser.
And I also cut a stretcher just wider than the distance of the step. So all else you need is some masking tape and some CA glue and some activator. To mark out the stair treads, I then put the two pieces flush against the walls and then buttered the flat spots up against the nosing. I then taped and glued the centerpiece to the two end pieces, locking them all together. Once I was happy with the measurements, I brought the jig into the shop and then butt the two flat spots to the back of the tread. I then marked the two sides of the jig onto the stair tread. I then cut the tread to size on my miter saw. And once you cut your step and it fits perfectly, you just break it away, peel away the tape, and then start again on the next step. It also works really great for the risers as well, using the exact same techniques. For the risers, I ripped down a bunch of 1/4 inch MDF and then painted the MDF with Benjamin Moore Scuff-x. And then using the same techniques as we did on the treads, I then marked the risers and then cut them to size on my miter saw. I made sure everything fit correctly and then it was time to apply the finish. For the finish of the stair treads, I'm using Bona Woodline Poly, which comes highly recommended for flooring. Once the finisher dries, I then attach the LED diffuser to the underside of each tread. But then my friend, who's a professional electrician, wired up each LED strip and then attached each strip to the inside of the diffuser. Once each LED strip was attached to the diffuser, we then applied the cover to the diffuser. Now it's time to install the treads and risers. I pre-drilled a bunch of holes in each tread so that I can screw the new treads into the staircase from underneath. And then starting from the bottom, I applied a silicone adhesive to the back of the riser. And then stuck the new riser to the existing risers on the staircase. Once the riser was glued in, I then applied subfloor adhesive to the tread above it, and then stuck down the new tread while fishing down the wires from the LED down the side of the staircase. If I wasn't able to feed the wire down the side of the staircase, I would have either fed it through the riser or the tread by drilling a small hole. I then screwed the treads in one by one from the underside of the staircase. Making sure that the risers sit on top of the treads, I then repeated the process all the way up to the top of the staircase, feeding each LED wire down the side of the staircase to the underneath.
So I have a very limited knowledge of electrical work. I mean, I can do switches and change lights and simple things like that, but LEDs are kind of beyond that for me. So I got the help of a professional electrician. And rather than me following him around all day with a camera and making him feel awkward, I was gonna let him do his thing and then we can go around and see what went down after the fact. And I'll try and explain into detail of what we did so you at home get a better idea of what we did, or what he did rather, but yeah. So each step has an LED strip, and each LED strip has one of these black and red wires coming together. This cable then goes to these transformers, which transform the 240 volts in your house to 12 volts, which are the LEDs. So to summarize that, each LED is connected together and then brought into these two transformers. So we have a power supply going to this junction box, and then from this junction box we have a supply going to the transformers, power and then transformers. We also have a wire going from the junction box to the switches upstairs, which helps us turn the LED strips on and off by those switches upstairs. I am not an electrician, so I probably butchered that explanation. So if you don't feel confident doing this on your own, you should get help by a professional electrician. Now that is kind of summed up, I can now tuck away these cables and then clean up this whole area.
Once all the stair treads were in, I then sanded down all the handrail compartments to 240 grit on my orbital sander. I then applied painter's tape either side of the channel where the glass sits. This is going to stop all the glue and the silicone oozing out everywhere and make it a little bit easier to clean up after the fact. I also drilled in some holes to the bottom side of the newel post, that way I can screw some lag screws through the newel post into the 2x12 subfloor, securing it into place. For the screws, I'm using 4-inch lag screws. Because I'm unable to finish the underside of the transition piece once it's all assembled, I applied some lacquer to help reduce cupping over time. While that was drying, I applied some PL construction adhesive to the subfloor to where the transition piece was going to sit. I then put the transition piece into place and then made sure I had an equal overhang on the wall. I marked out and screwed the transition piece through where the glass cutout is into the floor joist below. I also screwed the smaller newel post into the wall, making sure it's nice and plumb. I then glued and placed the main newel post into position. I attached the handrail dry and taped it into position so that I can level the main newel post before the glass goes in. Once it was level, I screwed it into the floor joist, locking it into place. I went around and applied a sparing amount of clear silicone inside the glass channel on all of the pieces. And then carefully drop the glass into place, making sure there was an equal 1/2 inch gap in between the two sheets of glass. Once I was happy with the position of the glass, I glued and attached the handrail. As it was really awkward to clamp, I found that painter's tape holds everything together really well, at least until the glue dries. Once everything was assembled, I then applied a small bead of silicone all the way around the gap where the glass and the wood meet. I then carefully cleaned up the silicone and then removed the blue painter's tape all the way around. The next day, once everything had dried, I gave the whole handrail a good sand with 240 grit in my orbital sander. I then applied Osmo oil to all the wood components. I removed all the excess oil with the blue shop towel. I let it dry for 8 hours and then gave the whole thing a sand with 320 grit and then applied a second coat of Osmo oil using the same techniques as before. I then reattached the baseboard and caulked everywhere where necessary, and then this massive project was finally complete. I am very happy how this project turned out, and it's made a huge difference to the space.